Hello and welcome to another week here on Viking.TV. And this week we are celebrating the world of fashion. And of course, you just can't do it without looking at the life and style of one person in particular, whose influence became part of history and global importance to an entire industry, let alone becoming one of the most famous faces and well-dressed figures in the world ever. And that is, of course, Princess Diana. Her style grew and evolved in front of our eyes. She started her public life cutting a shy, sometimes awkward and slightly unsophisticated figure, choosing fashions that, frankly, only mothers would think suitable. But she became a woman who understood fashion wasn't just an accessory, it was a statement about who you were and what you were feeling. Thus, to look at her sadly shortened life, her works, her courage in speaking out, her public compassion and massive achievements, it's also fascinating to look at her fashion sense and how she played it to very powerful effect. Well, my guest today has done just that and produced this fabulous, if rather heavy book, which is brilliant, looking at Diana's life in dresses. And it's brilliant to look through. Please meet author, journalist, genealogist, and we'll come to that later, Claudia Joseph from her home in London. Hello there and welcome.
Hello, it's nice to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you. Do you think other women before had ever been so influential on the whole world of fashion?
I think that's unlikely. I think Diana was very much a style icon in a different league because I think in earlier eras, we didn't have the power of television. We didn't have the power of the internet. Even in Diana's day, we didn't have that. But I think she was very young. She was very glamorous and bubbly and pretty. And she experimented with fashion. And I think that, you know, she became a superstar, and the newspapers were obviously filling their pages with Diana and what she wore, and the television stations were going mad. And I don't think that really happened before. I think it is happening again with Kate and Meghan perhaps, but certainly until then the royal family had been quite traditional dressers, and I think Diana mixed it up.
I mean, do you think, for instance, you could have done the same book about Queen Victoria?
I think that's unlikely because Queen Victoria spent most of her life in mourning, in her black mourning gear, and I think that she was influential in other ways. Obviously Christmas is very much down to Queen Victoria and the Christmas tree, but I think in terms of fashion, she wore very much the fashion of the era, and the crinoline dresses and the Victorian garb, so to speak, and mainly in black or mauve, and so I think it wasn't quite the same, no.
So if you're going to start to write a life in dresses, I mean, basically Princess Diana's story through her fashions, her story has been told in so many other ways. Where do you even start? Did you have to go into newspapers, picture libraries? How did you even know where to start?
Well, my idea was to track down where Diana's dresses are now to museums around the world, that people can go and see them, so to speak. So it was very much trying to find a new way to look at Diana's fashion. And I actually wrote a piece for You magazine where they asked me to track down some of her iconic dresses. And so I started off with the Christie's catalogue because 78 of those dresses were sold, or 79, sorry, were sold at auction at Christie's. And I went through those methodically, looking at where they are now. And then I spoke to the museums, and they had other pieces. So I tracked down, there's a museum in Santiago in Chile called the Museo de la Moda. And I spoke to the owner, Jorge, who has like 35 dresses belonging to Princess Diana. It's an amazing fashion museum. He's going to donate them to Kensington Palace in his will. And then I spoke to others, and I cross-referenced all of them. There's a couple of auction houses that sell a lot of fashion, and I went through their catalogues to see when they sold. So, for example, the John Travolta dress that Diana wore at the White House to dance with John Travolta, had been sold a few times. So I tracked it through. It's now in Kensington Palace.
Is it? Oh, good. I'm glad, actually. But I mean, I know I've leafed through your book. I've got a little video of him leafing through your book, and every dress reminds you of a story, of an incident in her lifetime. Is that true? Does every dress tell a story?
Well, I think that telling a story may be overplaying it sometimes. Some of the dresses did, but I think they all have memories, and you know, we remember her. We remember that black Elizabeth Emmanuel dress that you know, she didn't expect the cameras. Prince Charles told her of wearing black, or the current king, but Prince Charles then. And you know, and she got out of the car and leant forward and sort of gave the photographers a flash of her bust. And I think, you know, she wore that backless Catherine Walker dress that she wore with her pearls going down the back of her dress. I think she really loved experimenting, Diana. She enjoyed playing around, having fun with fashion. And, you know, she was very tall, had a model figure, and could give any supermodel a run for her money, I think.
Well, I know as you leaf through the book, we inevitably end on the dress that became known as the revenge dress, which was that amazing black dress in which she just looked $1 million. There you go. And every woman looking at that was thinking, well, right, that's Charles. That Charles is what you are missing.
Exactly.
And there was a story behind that. And I know we should probably start to tell Diana's story from the beginning, but if we can start at the end with that one, what was that saying? What was happening at the time in her life?
Well, that was a very difficult time because she was separated from Prince Charles, and she felt very much alone and out on her own. And she was very conscious, and it was the night that Prince Charles did his infamous interview with Dimbleby, and she was going to a soiree at the Serpentine Gallery, and she wasn't sure what to wear, and she was going to wear a Valentino dress, I think, and then it leaked to the papers, and she was furious. So she went back and looked through her wardrobe with Paul Burrell and decided on this dress, which of course was much shorter than she'd ever worn, and black and sexy, and of course the papers put two and two together and dubbed it the revenge dress. In fact, she was going to buy it in white or in cream, not black, originally. She went to see, I interviewed Christina Stambolian, who designed the dress, and she'd popped in with her brother Charles Spencer on the way back from lunch at San Lorenzo, sorry.
Yeah, San Lorenzo, very famous.
Yeah. So she'd popped in with her brother Charles on the way back from San Lorenzo, and was just browsing, and she bought a few things and then said, do you have any dresses? And Christina showed her this one, and Diana was like, oh, I'd quite like it in cream, and Christina was like, no, this dress needs to be in black. And she bought it and hadn't worn it for 3 years, and Christina was like, is she ever going to wear this dress? And then suddenly that night she pulled it out of her wardrobe, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Well, what does that tell you?
Well, that she basically, there was a Diana effect. You know, every single thing she wore sold out. People copied her jumpers with the sheep on the front, and her dungarees and her sweatshirts and her baseball caps and her chokers that she wore around her head as a headband. She was very much a girl of her era, I think, and her fashion changed according to the times. So we saw her, you know, starting out as a little Sloane Ranger, effectively, and then, you know, at the end, she was very much a working woman with a working woman's wardrobe of Chanel suits and, you know, sensible shoes and, you know, very glamorous evening gowns.
Now, there are a lot of people watching at the moment. Most of our audience are American and might not quite understand what a Sloane Ranger is. Can you describe what a Sloane Ranger was, and was she one?
I think she was a Sloane Ranger. A Sloane Ranger was a term coined by Peter York, who was worked at Tatler magazine for aristocratic and public school educated girls who sort of came up to London from the country in their sort of pie crusted collared frilly blouses and maybe pedal pushers, and it was a look of women with money, but perhaps who weren't influential style wise. But it was copied a lot with the pearls, the collars with the pearls, and it was sort of British,
pearls.
Yeah, British preppy look really, for a certain type of girl, and that was not trying to stand out from the crowd.
And was she a Sloane Ranger then?
I think she definitely was a Sloane Ranger. They were very influenced by the New Romantics and the adamant and all the frills of that era, and everybody was wearing the same sort of things. And you'd walk down the King's Road in Chelsea or go to Peter Jones in Sloane Square. Everybody was from a certain background was wearing the same uniform.
God, I'm afraid I remember it. So when absolutely, it's awful, isn't it, when you look back? But when her engagement was announced, was she prepared fashion-wise, let alone anything else? Because I gather you write in the book that she only had one ball gown, really.
She only had one long dress, one silk shirt, and a pair of shoes, smart shoes. I mean, she had jeans, obviously, and country gear, but she did, the girls, she lived in a flat with other girls, and they all used to swap clothes and share outfits, and suddenly she needed a whole wedding trousseau. And she didn't really know what to do. Her mother sent her along to visit Belleville Sassoon, the designer David Sassoon, who I also interviewed for the book. And she popped in one Friday afternoon, I think, but one afternoon anyway, towards closing time. There was a very grand vendeuse there who was like, well, what do you want, a dress or a suit? And she was looking for an engagement outfit. And the vendeuse obviously wanted to go home and thought, this silly little girl, I haven't got time for this, and sent her to Harrods. And then you see her getting engaged to the then Prince Charles in this blue Kajana suit, which was picked up off the peg from Harrods. And apart from matching the ring, really did nothing for her. And of course, the next day, David Sassoon and Belinda Belleville were in the shop when a girl, one of the sales assistants, said, I think Princess Diana came in yesterday.
Oh, crumbs.
Or Lady Diana Spencer. And they went, you're joking.
Oh.
And she just sent them to Harrods.
And they missed such a, and actually that outfit, and we all can remember it now, that blue outfit didn't do anything for anyone, did it? It wasn't a knockout.
No.
Yes, it matched the beautiful ring and the blue in her eyes, but that was it, really.
It was.
How did she end up then? I mean, how do you, as a young girl, she was only 19, and only her mum and her mum's generation to advise her. How did she, in the end, meet up with the Emmanuels and find something that was a bit more special?
I think that Diana was very innocent and naive, and she was very young to be marrying a future king, really. Her sisters both worked at Vogue magazine. So her mother took her into Vogue and to meet Anna Harvey, who became a sort of stylist for her, so to speak. Yeah. And when she was doing her engagement portrait, Anna called in lots of designs from different designers that she thought might look good on Diana. And Diana picked up this pink frilly collared blouse from the Emmanuels for the portrait that Lord Snowdon did of her. And that was her first introduction to them. And then she went back to them for the wedding. Well, then she went and sat in the Emmanuel's studio, which I think was in off South Molton Street in those days, in the centre of Soho.
Yeah.
And she went in and she was going to the Goldsmiths Hall with Charles in that infamous black dress. And she needed a dress for that. And she basically borrowed the dress from the Emmanuels. It had already been worn by other people. And she wore that dress too. And then she gave it back to them to be taken in because she'd lost so much weight. And they gave her another version and shoved the original in a bin bag. And it was only found years later. And when they sold it, they found it and sold it at auction.
Oh my God, that's almost unbelievable. But it's almost unbelievable too that they missed so many tricks. I mean, this woman was going to become probably the next Queen of England, and they were missing her. They were letting her down. She needed guidance and real style guidance, didn't she?
Well, I suppose
so. When you're 19 and you're just about to marry the Prince of Wales, how do you even know what your style is?
Well, you don't, but I suppose I think that's the nature of the royal family, is that, if you look at pictures of the Princess of Wales now, Kate, and you look at her, and I think she looks always best in jeans and wellies.
Yeah.
I think that the Queen always looked best in her country gear. You see Charles in his, in the hedgerows with his patched pockets and patched elbows. They are really a country family, and they're used to glamming up for their job. But I think, she did have Anna Harvey on call from almost day one. But yes, the royal family didn't guide her on that. I don't think they've guided any of them.
But even designers get it wrong, don't they?
Well, yes. And there was some awful outfits. David Sassoon did a lot of her couture, and Victor Edelstein, who is just a marvelous designer. And I think they guided her, and she had access to a lot of, she had a decent budget for her wardrobe, and she took advice from designers, and then got more and more daring, I think, as time went on.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. How do you know very much about how they budget these sort of things, or at least how they did it for her? Because I know that Princess Elizabeth, who became Queen Elizabeth, was a beautiful young woman, and was invited to, wear certain creations. But how do they budget it, and how did they for Diana? Do you know?
Well, I certainly know that the Kate's clothing budget until recently came from Prince Charles and the Duchy of Cornwall budget. So there would have been a budget from Prince Charles and the Duchy of Cornwall for Diana, I would imagine. I think it's like anything else. They have the money from the civil list, the sovereign grant, and they have to budget accordingly. They know that if they're doing overseas tours, that they need to showcase British designers, but also nod to the host country. So you'll see them wearing the Queen's famous maple leaf brooch that she wore to Canada, and then Kate has worn to Canada. Diana, they've all these gems come out again and again, and they will wear, for example, in Canada, they all tend to wear red and white, the colours of the flag. So I think it's part of any other budget that has to be paid for, the retinue of staff and everything else.
We've got a bunch of photographs now of what I would call the Diana we came to know, slightly more mature, beginning to learn her own style. That photograph there, I think, is, well, it's just one of those dreadful hats again, but beginning to choose her own outfits. But again, who's in charge? How many clothes do they have, and who is their wardrobe mistress, and how powerful is that person?
Well, I think it's less different to us than you expect. I think it's telling that when Diana sold her dresses off for charity when she divorced Charles, she came onto the public scene in 81 and she died in 97. And the sale was 97. So that's 18 years. And over that period, she was selling 80 dresses off. Now, that's not a huge amount. And she didn't have a huge jewelry collection either. And she did recycle and wear the same things. And so I think that, the Queen obviously had Angela Kelly, who looked after her wardrobe at Buckingham Palace. There was a whole floor. Angela Kelly made a lot of the clothes for the Queen. And I think Diana very much relied on her designers. You know, she started off with her couturiers like Victor Edelstein and David Sassoon and Bruce Oldfield. And then she discovered Catherine Walker. And I think they were similar age, young mums, got on very well. And Catherine wasn't a traditional couturier. She was more a seamstress and she made a lot of Diana's clothes. The majority of the ones at auction during that era, the long dresses that she wore on tour, that beautiful Grace Kelly dress there, were made by Catherine Walker. And Diana would sort of ring her up and say, I need something for this. Or her lady in waiting might ring up Catherine. And then Catherine would send some drawings over. And it was all fairly simple. And I imagine Diana she had a butler, Paul Burrell. So I think that he was responsible for the wardrobe. And I think she just had a big closet and, you know, pulled out what she felt like wearing.
Also, Diana knew that every single day she was being photographed, and you couldn't wear the same thing every day. Even when she was going to the gym, she was obviously trying to wear a different outfit and make a different statement. She started to understand the power of what she was wearing, power dressing, I guess, and started to make a statement about her feelings as well when she was on certain tours or events.
Well, yes, she certainly understood that she was being photographed all the time. In fact, she wore the same outfit to the gym every day to stop the photographers taking pictures of her. So she got quite savvy on that front. She was very aware on tour that she was representing Britain and doing a job. And I think, but in private, I think, you know, she would wear her normal clothes as we all would, and jeans and T-shirts. And I think that, yes, in later life, she was certainly aware that the effect her clothing had and the publicity she gave to the designers. Catherine Walker, for example, was very shocked because Catherine Walker used to cover up pictures of her clients when anybody went into the studio so that they couldn't see who she worked for. She was very discreet, very private, very French. And she was horrified when, I can't remember whether it was Good Morning Britain or one of the TV shows back in the day, revealed that Diana had worn a Catherine Walker. And she was absolutely shocked that, that this had been revealed, because she thought, this is not, I would reveal my private clients. And Diana said to her, don't worry, I told them to say it was a Catherine Walker. And she had revealed it was, and the royal family are quite discreet about the designers they use. So I think Diana was keen to give people publicity. The Queen was very laid back about I've interviewed several of the Queen's designers, and the Queen's jeweler and the milliner, etc. And they're quite happy to talk about dressing the Queen. Kate, a lot of Kate's designers are quite terrified of talking about her, and I think they have to sign quite draconian contracts. I think she's probably will relax now because she's been in the royal family a long time. But I know that when I wrote my book on Kate's fashion, it was quite hard because people wouldn't even give me copies of a picture of a dress that she'd worn, and it was like, but she's worn this dress in public.
Yes,
it's your design. Why you And they were quite scared and nervous.
But I remember when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, and she held a big cocktail party at number 10 Downing Street for British Fashion Week. And it was very much because Princess Diana was at the forefront in the global world of British fashion. And they were very proud, not only of the fact that she was wearing British labels everywhere she went, but that she was doing so much for the industry itself.
Well, she did a huge amount for the industry. I think that was the occasion when she went straight up to Jasper Conran and kissed him hello and said, how are you, Jasper? She was, look, I think we expect royalty to be so different from us, but I think ultimately, Diana was just a normal girl in her 20s who mixed. I mean, yes, she came from an elite, privileged background, but these people became her friends.
And very much trusted friends as well. She had to trust them because she had to look good. Tell us the story of when she went to Washington and met President Reagan and wore the dress that in the end she danced with John Travolta in.
Well, it was a navy blue dress by Victor Edelstein, stunning dress. And she had gone to the White House with Prince Charles, and John Travolta had turned up, but he'd been invited by himself, and he thought, that's a bit strange. Why have I not been invited with, my wife or a plus one? And Diana had said, apparently, I'd love to dance with John Travolta. So at that, our dinner ended, and John Travolta went and said, would you like to dance, Mom? And she said yes, and they took to. Diana was a very, very keen dancer. She did ballet. She danced with Wayne Sleep on stage, and she danced a lot. She was very good and loved it. And so, yes, that's how that came about. And then Victor was, well, I wonder what time that would have been. It must have been the middle of the night. But Victor got a phone call from Andre Talon at Vogue saying, so tell me about the dress. Tell me, why navy? Why velvet? And Victor was like, it was just a dress I made for her. She probably had 3 dresses in Washington and just chose to wear that one, But there's all that sort of, what's the story behind? And often there isn't. It's just it's beautiful.
And you've got one of the original sketches of that very dress, haven't you?
Well, Victor very kindly did some sketches for my book, and then which I gave to the publishers, and then he invited me to lunch and when I gave him a copy of the book, because I interviewed 5 or 6 of Diana's designers, and he's got an amazing Italian wife. They're both now painters now. He doesn't do fashion design anymore, and they're both artists. And his wife Anna Maria invited me to lunch when I interviewed him, and then they invited me back, and he'd drawn one specially. He'd drawn up the picture especially for me, so that I've got one in my hands.
It is one of those absolutely iconic dresses. Now it's in our living memory, isn't it? It's a beautiful dress in itself, but it is also Princess Diana, and there are several that are iconic dresses. I suppose that one, the revenge dress that we talked about before. And the wedding dress, of course.
Yes. Well, the wedding dress was very much Diana in the early days of her. You look at how we've gone from that very frilly how to dress like a princess dress to a very sleek, sexy black number. They couldn't be more different, those 2 dresses, could they?
No, they couldn't. And one's white to black. And it's also, it is young and floral and very fancy and 80s, a young girl, a virgin bride, as they say, and then right through to the revenge dress, which is very meaningful. It does almost tell the story of her life, doesn't it?
I think so. It is. It is fascinating looking back over those dresses, because she didn't, until her divorce, she really didn't want to overshadow Charles. So she wore a lot of flat heels, but also she didn't want to embarrass William and Harry. So she didn't wear mini dresses. Whereas the rest of us around that era were wearing minis and heels and things like that during the 80s. She was conscious that she didn't want to embarrass her sons. So it was Jacques Azaguri who designed what he calls her famous 5 dresses, which are stunning. And he persuaded her to go a bit shorter. So he designed the beautiful dresses with the fishtail and the sequin dresses. So I think there was one in red.
Yeah. Azaguri.
Towards the end of the book.
All right. I did. Go on, do talk.
Towards the end of the book, they're the 5. Yeah, you've got them there, I think. I can see the red. Can I?
But is it under Azaguri?
Yes. There's an index as well.
Chanel, pink Escada.
Oh yeah, it's before that.
Before that, blue velvet. I'll find it. Black Chanel, Lady in Red.
That's one of them, isn't it?
That's one of them. I don't know.
Maybe it's not. Sorry, maybe I'm interrupting.
Black Fishtail.
Yes, that's it.
Oh, the black. Oh, right. We don't see the tail, unfortunately. That's what's so
the
annoying about sometimes the copyright on these photographs is you don't see exactly the white silk chiffon.
You go back to Jacques at the beginning. There should be drawings.
Sandra Rhodes. No, we're out of.
Yes.
No. Okay.
Anyway,
I'll find it. We'll show them off. But that's interesting that but that's the point, isn't it? She was learning that what she wore was saying a lot about who she was and how she was feeling.
Yeah.
Do you find it a bit sort of sad that they're now exhibited all around the world? And I mean, who buys them?
A lot of them were sold to Americans for charitable purposes. So they originate. So they a lot of rich American housewives bought them at auction, and they then did a traveling exhibition for breast cancer. So I think it was called the Pink Ribbons Crusade. So they would exhibit them for lunches, ladies who lunch, that sort of thing. Then a lot were bought up by the museum in Santiago. Kensington Palace, the historic royal palaces, of course, have fashion exhibitions quite often. So a lot of them are owned by Kensington. That's where the John Travolta dress is now. And then they're interesting. There are two in the Met in New York, which were donated to the museum by these women who bought them from auction. There's two in Japan, which were bought by a college in Japan who wanted their fashion students to be able to see them. Yeah, so they're, there's a museum in Ireland, they're costume museums, they're in costume museums on the whole, or there's a virtual museum as well in America. There's a Princess Diana virtual museum, and she has bought a lot of items, but she tends to she wants to buy outfits that people haven't seen Diana in, so these iconic ones.
I mean, you trained yourself as a fashion journalist at the London College of Fashion, which is a very big deal. Is there a dress that you would like to own of Diana's? Just to own it?
Yeah, well, definitely. I'd like to own them all. I think if I was going to, I don't want to upset any of the designers, but probably one of Victor's. I'd like the Travolta dress, I think.
Yeah.
Navy blue velvet. But I do love, I mean, there are quite a lot of them I like. The revenge dress would be fantastic. And yes, not the later ones. And Jacques Azaguri is a lovely man, and he has beautiful designs. And he still has copies of the famous five. So yeah.
Gosh,
they're beautiful. They're all beautiful, but
they are beautiful, beautiful gowns, aren't they? I want to ask you. I mean, you went to the London College of Fashion, which is quite something anyway. But you trained as a fashion journalist rather than as a designer. Have you cut and made patterns and designed things yourself, or were you into the history of it more?
Well, I started off life wanting to be a fashion designer, and then I realised I couldn't really draw. I used to parade around the house with sort of skirts on upside down and saying this puff, I designed the puffball skirt before anyone else did. Not that it was very practical. And so I was always very keen on clothes. I used to make my own clothes for parties. I once made myself a gold strapless dress, two-tiered, but I had run out of gold fabric, so I put the underneath skirt on suspender straps so that it and then when I was dancing and it became irritating, I pulled it off and shortened the dress. So I was always making clothes for friends as well. And then I just thought, and I got a job at Condé Nast at Tatler as a secretary, and just thought, and then so I spent I've always thought that you don't decide what job you want to do, you decide what subject you're interested in, and everything else sort of follows. So I started off as a secretary at Condé Nast at Tatler, and then I went off to the London College of Fashion after being at Tatler for 2 years, I think. But I would go back and temp at Condé Nast, at Vogue and Tatler during the holidays, and I'd write. Started writing for them. So, and by the time I'd finished the London College of Fashion, I was sort of bored of writing about sleeve lengths and you know, I think it was two things. One was the fact that it was just endless criticism of clothing and nothing else, but also it took away the pleasure from the enjoyment of fashion for me. So I think if you see the workings behind the scenes of anything, you lose, you know, the fun to a certain extent. It's like if you've written a book, you can sort of see how it's been done, and then the magic goes a bit. So I went up, did my.
Clearly, you're fascinated by the history and the evolution of fashion.
I'm interested in history generally, I think, but I'm just your average hack, and I just like finding things out and researching and digging.
Yeah, you're a researcher. So, how did you get into genealogy then?
Well, back in the day, it was part of journalistic training. You know, when I worked on Today newspaper, which we're talking in 95, before it closed, I was taken to the Public Records Office, which was in Somerset House in those days. I was taken to where I could get wills, where you could get birth certificates, marriage certificates, and I just happened to be quite good at it, because most people will go looking for, I don't know, a marriage certificate, and they'll stop when they find. So if I was looking for your marriage certificate, they would stop, say, "Oh, and that Diamond's married, I know, Jack Azaguri," and they'd only find the first one, whereas I would do the whole trawl.
Go further, yeah.
And then I'd say, "Well, there are 3 possibles," and I just was quite good at it, and I found it quite interesting. And then I got known for it at the Mail on Sunday, and they asked me to do Kate's family history, and I unearthed lots of relatives who had no idea they were related to her.
Absolutely. And of course it's interesting because it is interesting almost with any member of the royal family, because they have a background that not all of us know, and in many cases they've tried to keep very quiet. But with Kate, I mean, she is a, for heaven's sake, commoner, as they call it. And so she's got a very interesting background, family history. And you've met many of them, haven't you?
Well, I did end up with power of attorney for one of them.
Power of attorney?
Yes. I know, he latched onto me after his wife died, and he got dementia, so I did end up with power. He had nobody, so his next door neighbour and myself ended up looking after him until he died. So.
Oh, goodness. I know. I mean, you get involved in people's histories, and you have done that. You've found relatives of people who literally put you onto that, find this relative, and you've been able to do that.
Yes, and I mean, I wrote the first book on the Duchess of Cambridge, now the Princess of Wales. So I sort of tracked down not that many, because they were all sort of estranged, as families often are. And one of them, the one I got to know very well, they used to know Kate's grandparents very well, and they had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs. And, you know, so the pictures of Kate as a baby at 21 days old, the pictures of her as a schoolgirl with Pippa and James, those, you know, they just had all these photographs. And so someone at the office said, "You should write a book." And I was like, no idea how to do that. And I said, talk to the books editor, and the next thing I knew, I had a book deal. So it was
and you've written quite a few books. I mean, your last one about Kate, is it the last one you've done so far? How to Dress Like a Princess?
Yes.
I mean, how brilliant is Kate at doing the job she does now, and how do you think she compares with Diana? Horrible question, isn't that? I'm sorry.
I don't think there is I think they're very similar in lots of ways. I think that they both. I mean, Diana was more interested in fashion than Kate is. I think Kate is a country girl. I think that's why she gets on so well with William and the Royals, because that's her background. She grew up in the home counties, not far from William, went to the same sort of school, and there's a lot of friends in common, and always have been. One's royal, one's not, but it's much more about school nowadays than about whether you're a member of the royal family or not. I think Diana was, just generally starstruck. It's quite different because Kate's now 40 and Diana was 37 when she died.
Yeah.
Kate's a grown up, and Diana was, loved the limelight, the glamour, the fairy tale. I don't think she was grown up enough to understand that she was overshadowing her husband. I think she loved everybody looking at her. And I think if you look at William and Kate, they're very much more a team. They work together. They don't go one down one side and one the other side. They tend to work together and work the room. And I think, but I think Kate's wardrobe is very much a working wardrobe. And I think it's interesting that since the Queen's died, we've seen a lot more of her in trousers.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I wondered whether she feels more relaxed. But, she's got some wonderful flared trouser suits and pussycat blouses. It's difficult to judge, isn't it? Because, you look back to the fashion of the 80s and you just grimace because it was just, you just don't want to look at what you wore.
No, I know, it's just awful, isn't it?
And it's whereas the 90s, I think, was coming up to the famous Vogue cover of the 5 supermodels. I don't know if you've remember that picture with Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, Chrissy Turlington, etc. And it was a beautiful decade, the last decade of her life, because people were wearing very high glamorous heels, court shoes and mini dresses and fitted bodycon. And I think that was very stylish.
But when you even look at the Queen, the late Queen, she matured through. She went through a pretty bad phase, probably 90s, the early 20s,
I think 70s.
Well, yeah, but in her last decade, she looked fantastic. What happened?
Angela Kelly happened, basically. She got a new dresser, and I think they were quite close. Well, they were very close, and I think Angela Kelly sort of worked out what suited the Queen. I think she looked fabulous in the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
She was dressed by Norman Hartnell and all the couturiers of the day, and then I think there was an in-between phase where she reached middle age and people weren't sure how to dress her, and she wore that Harlequin outfit, I think, to the Royal Variety performance. And
she wore some dreadful outfits and some dreadful hats, didn't she?
But I think you'll find we all did.
Well, yes, I know. Isn't that scary? But at some point, Angela Kelly is the dresser come confidant that people have been writing a lot about just recently, thinking that she had maybe too much influence on the Queen. But there's no doubt that in the last decade of her life, the Queen looked fabulous. These wonderful, bright colours, hats that matched, big smiles. I mean, she looked wonderful towards the end of her life, didn't she?
I think so. And I think that the bright colours were very important because she wanted to be seen to stand out from the crowd. And she always said, she said to, I think it was to Norman Hartnell when she came to the throne, I do not want to be seen as a Hollywood starlet. You know, I'm doing a job, I'm royal, and it's different. And I think that Kate gets that, Sophie Wessex gets that, but I don't think Diana got that. She wanted, and Meghan certainly doesn't. They want to be.
They wanted to be the centre of attention. But I've got a still here, I think, of the Princess of Wales. She was the Duchess of Cambridge then, Kate. with the Duchess of Cornwall, who is now, of course, the Queen Consort. And they both have come into their own. I mean, what do you think of the way Camilla has presented herself fashion-wise? She has really worked on it and succeeded, don't you think?
Oh, I think she looks amazing. I think, yes. I think she's discovered what suits her. I mean, we all go through this at certain stages in our life. And I can remember going to Harvey Nichols with my poor brother, in my 20s, and saying, I don't know what suits me. I don't know if I suit flared skirts or straight skirts or this or that. And I think the problem is that if you're Diana, you did that in the public eye. If you were the Queen, you did that in the public eye.
Yes.
Kate didn't really have to do anything in the public eye until she was 30. So, but even then, I don't think many women really discover their style until their 50s. And then, and Camilla was used to going.
That's interesting.
And wearing jeans, and I think it takes a long time.
That's interesting. You just said that you don't think a woman discovers her style until they're in their 50s.
I said some women. I said quite a lot of women don't, I think. I think it takes a long time to discover what suits. I think it takes a long time to balance the fashion of the day with what suits your body.
And if you are a royal woman, obviously the scrutiny on you is unbearable almost, and you've got to wear these blinking hats to everything. Do you think hats are a nightmare for them, like they are for most of us?
Well, I make hats and love hats, so I'm the wrong person to ask. I love a good hat. I think that you have to know how to wear them, and you have to have a good milliner. But yes, I've made some. I live around the corner from a designer called Edwina Ibbotson, and she makes very expensive, beautiful hats. She made the hat that Pippa wore to the Prince George's christening. And one day I was walking past, nose to the window, and there was a sign saying millinery classes. So I did a course, yes, I think
you've got a fringe and long dark hair. Is there a particular style of hat that suits you, or do you think you can almost wear anything as long as it sort of feels right? Because I can't get my head around hats at all.
I think if you don't wear them or haven't grown up going to weddings and wearing hats, then
you have to be used to it.
I happen to be someone who can almost put any hat on and wear hats. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've got a small head, or maybe it's I have no idea why, but I suit hats and I love hats. And that's,
I mean, look at that one. That's the Countess of Wessex, who is now the Duchess of Edinburgh. So
and she's still the Countess of Wessex. But yes, the Duchess of Edinburgh. I think she's
going. Yeah. I mean, come on, that's a dreadful hat, isn't it?
Oh, I think it's beautiful.
Oh, do you? Oh, I'm so sorry. All right. I just don't know where I'm
right or wrong.
I'm one of those people who watches a royal wedding or a royal occasion just to criticise the hats and think some of them are dreadful, but I don't know what I would do myself if I were invited. It's
that hat that Kate's wearing is beautiful. Do you not?
Yes, it is. And the one that Camilla wore on her wedding day was outstanding, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that one.
I think that's a Philip Tracy, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the most famous milliners. I mean, it was outstanding. She got it dead right that day, didn't she?
Yes, well, she's got some very good designers she works with, Camilla, which helps. And I think she's, if you look at early pictures of her, she was wearing sort of pencil skirts type things with traditional, country tweeds and all that sort of thing. And she looks very, very much better in sort of what Trini and Susanna would have said, in the sort of X shape. With the shoulders in at the waist and wide skirts. So she looks good in 50s fashions, basically, that sort of shape, as opposed to a lot of people sort of wear, I don't know, shift dresses and pencil skirts. And if you're hourglassy or if you're not as skinny as a rake, it doesn't work.
It's like you said, you've got to know, and maybe it takes quite a few years to know your shape. who you are, really. But that's the point, isn't it? That your fashion, your style. I don't know if you suddenly become a princess like Diana did, and you're thrust into this world where every single day you have to go out and you have to look good because people are making judgments about you. It's pretty hard going, isn't it?
I think it's pretty hard going if you were Sarah Ferguson as
Yeah.
opposed to Diana. I think it was pretty hard going if you're Beatrice and Eugenie. Less hard going if you're Kate or Diana, because on the whole, you look lovely in the photographs. And so people, everybody's trolling nowadays. If you read the trolls, I'm sure it's hideous. But I think in terms of Diana knew that she looked fabulous. And so I don't think it was too much of a hardship to be on the front.
But didn't she learn somewhat painfully that you have to be slender?
Well, she was never not slender, was she?
No, I suppose she was just a little bit chubby, and that hurt her a lot at the beginning, because that's what the press maligned her for from the very beginning, in the black ball gown that she wore, and she was slightly.
I don't think she was ever maligned for her weight. I think that was very much. I think that her bulimia was very much about control, not about weight. I think that was about, background, having married, just having taken this step into a lifestyle that blatantly didn't suit her, with a man that she should have never married, who was in love with someone else. It was a terrible, terrible decision by everybody involved that those two ever got married. I mean, why would you marry anyone at the age of 21 anyway? That sent her to that. She was, slaughtered at that age. Charles should have known better. The Queen should have known better. Her grandmother, Lady Fermoy, should. I mean, her sister. Everybody should have known better and dissuaded her from marrying. But I think her bulimia was emotional. It wasn't about losing weight, because those pictures of her at the Goldsmiths Hall falling out of the Emmanuel dress they all thought, the press thought she was fabulous.
Yes, they were nothing. They were nothing to be ashamed of at all. She looked wonderful.
But I think she slimmed down because of the anxiety. Slimmed down between that and the wedding, not because of wanting to look slimmer, but because she was terrified of what she had let herself in for. And the Emmanuels kept having to take the wedding dress in. I think they did 7/12s because she lost so much weight. And
I can understand that because of the scrutiny involved, and also whatever hang-ups she had at the time. When you compare the lives, the fashion lives, if you like, of Diana and Kate, I think we have to be much more optimistic about Kate's future, don't we? She seems to be much more self-assured. She knows what she's doing.
I think she does. I mean, she's 40 now, so she's, she is a grown-up. She's got 3 children. What she did, she knew William very well when they got married. She'd lived with him. It was a different world to the world that Diana was living in. And they chose each other. It was not an arranged marriage as such. And then she spent the first 10 years of their marriage sort of working away behind the scenes, learning about her legacy project, the early years, discovering what suited her, and just playing it very safe. I think she got on very well with Queen. She and William have obviously emulated the Queen and Philip in the way they've chosen to do the role. They lived out of the public eye in the same way that Philip and Elizabeth did in the early years of their marriage. And then, they've spent time with their children and taken it very gently. And I think Kate is now pretty self-assured. She's, the mother of 3 lovely children. She knows a lot about early years, does a lot of charity work. And I think, it's a safe pair of hands.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lovely note to end on. Congratulations on the book. I know you've written one about Kate. Well, you've written many. We've got lots of pictures of all of the books you've written. But this one is a masterpiece just because it's just so beautiful. And it's a celebration not only of her life in dresses, but actually of her life. It's the way we all remember her. And it's a nice way to remember her too.
Well,
thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. It was lovely to meet you.
Claudia, it's lovely to meet you.
And you. And hopefully we'll speak again sometime.
Yes, I hope we will. Well, there's an awful lot more to talk about too. Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And to everyone watching at the moment, thank you very much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed that. Lots of wonderful memories and pictures to go with them. Until next week, thank you and goodbye.